We believe that public data, non-personal public data made publicly available, is a public good. And how do we go about that? Well, to set the context a little bit further back, the research behind some of what we've been doing began with an EPSRC-funded IRC project back in 2001. A project lasted for 5 years, which I was directing between a number of universities, but that was all looking at a new set of technologies to exploit the web, information on the web. And toward the end of that project, we became involved with a very fashionable part of government, the Office for Public Sector Information. What could be more? This is the people in charge of Crown copyright and this sort of stuff. And a European directive called the Directive on Public Sector Information, whose principal objective, just as a high piece of law in the EU, was to make public sector information available without reasonable let or hindrance. Well, there are all sorts of law around. Whether they can be enacted and supported is another matter. We worked for a year or two with them and a range of local and government agencies to try and see whether our technology, which I don't have time to talk about today, it's available to like on the stand, was a way in which we could overcome the whole perennial problem of information silos, various forms of data sets locked away. The fundamental idea behind this, and the reason I've been working closely with Tim Berners-Lee, is to exploit a new set of web standards that will move us beyond a web of documents to an integrated web of data. Essentially, every item of data also has a web address where you can access that information, scrutinize it, integrate it into applications. So documents have web addresses, so does data. And in fact, that work was reported into Parliament in 2007. This is the AKT project here, University of Southampton. We had had an impact back in 2007. There was a sense that this was exciting technology. That was important because we had some people who believed in this approach within government. The next thing that happened, you can never legislate for. Gordon Brown invited Tim Berners-Lee for lunch and said, what can we do? And he said, well, give us your data and we'll turn public data into a web of data. So this was the project we were given, essentially to go about creating data.gov.uk. We were appointed in 2009. Interestingly, this whole move to open up data caught the imagination of all political parties. The Coalition Manifesto programme is full of references to it. And indeed, the political narrative is somewhat different. There's talk of transparency as the essential driving force here, but the essential idea is to open up government data. Local authorities are releasing data now, even cities. So in data.gov.uk, we have built a site which now hosts over 4,000 data sets. It is not a big database. It is a single point of access. It was built using open source, open standards. Horror of horrors, it uses a concept of the perpetual beta. This is not a finished piece of software. It was built with 3 to 5 person-years of effort in 6 months. It also contains canonical data sets. So one of the things that we did out there was we realized and recognized that we had to go for key data sets that have proved intractable. Was there the political will, for example, to unlock ordnance survey mapping data? The kind of data that you need to link all the other data together, location data, the free ability to use your postcode without having to pay for it, or to decide where your administrative boundary was, to decide whether you were or were not within an MP's constituency. Previously paid for data, now freely available. We've had a lot of experience of overcoming the objections about making data transparently available. We've now got a community of data users and developers. We've had throughout 2 governments, political and leadership, and we're now establishing public data principles. So if you go to the data.gov.uk site, you will see a set of public data principles which we are now trying to make part of the public task of all public bodies. If you collect this stuff, and it is non-personal, there must be a presumption to publish in a machine-readable format. PDF files will not do. Okay, so this is quite a striking set of developments around a set of research standards that have now become embedded as global web data standards. We're starting, as people once said, You change culture by changing behavior. If the behavior of a department can move from the data hugging mentality to a publication mentality, you may be making progress. I'm not sure this is the best one, to be rather eye-catching application. One of the early successes that we could show in front of ministers was actually the ASBOrometer, which you can download on your iPhone. It will tell you what the local ASBO rate is. This is a dull spreadsheet that was sitting there unloved and unowned in the Home Office. Okay? It now powers an iPhone app. The key thing was that once the data was made available, somebody else built the app in about 5 days. It's 20% in Westminster, it turns out, and last quarter 6 crack houses were closed down in Westminster. And quite a few evictions, but that may be okay. Location, open government data. This, in a sense, was crucial. We're now starting to see the ability of integrating data across geographic boundaries. The graphic on the right there is, again, an unfashionable data set called NAPTAN, the National Access Transportation Network. This is the data set that contains the information about where the bus stops are, for example. Data you couldn't get for love nor money. Turns out 12% of them aren't in the place they thought they were, okay? Which is, again, quite a useful thing to know. And in these sorts of areas, interestingly enough, I have an application here from the national train operators called, it'll tell me when my next train runs. Nice. I paid $4.99 for it, but I wish that data were freely available. In fact, the other application writers who tried to write such a thing were told to cease and desist. Apparently, the national train operators would rather make a few bob out of applications on the iPhone than have people know when the trains run. So I think there is here many applications and contexts where freeing up the data generates much more economic value at scale than sitting on it. This is the more eye-catching stuff we're now engaged in. I'm involved in the local data panel in guidelines about government spend, and this is quite dramatic. Every local authority will be publishing all items of spend above £500 by January 1st, and some have. There's the red card. Oh, I'm at 8 minutes 57, according to this. But the interesting thing about this is, speaking to the issue around procurement, this data at this grain size begins to tell you and give you an ability to ask interesting questions about whether our procurement is skewed, interestingly, different between councils and so on. Just to finish off, we are using a range of technology here to represent data, as I say, using a new set of standards. We have this STAR system, which we accord to data sets. We'd rather have them on the web than not at all. We'd rather have them in a machine-readable format. Even a CSV file from a spreadsheet will do. We'd prefer an open format. We'd love you to have web addresses to the data. And if you could link it together, we could show you the ability to link data sets across departments. This is the Ordnance Survey's linked data set now available on administrative geography. This allows us, this is our Southampton project, you can see this, to link data. This is from the index of multiple deprivation. A whole range of additional demographic and social data can be integrated together to produce new kinds of potential analytic tool that not just the researchers, but bright people out there with a burning issue can get hold of and do something interesting with. And this matters, we believe, as a piece of applied research that's driving policy, because I think we do need to know what's going on, decide whether it's acceptable. The localism in a lot of these data sets is very interesting. The police are going to be asked to publish crime data at the street level in January. Now, there are real issues around here that relate. It's not simply just publish and forget. There are serious issues around privacy, identification, around the issues to do with timeliness and the quality of data. The government's view on this at this point, again, one of the data principles, is that timely release is to be preferred against late release to improve the quality of the data by some little amount, if the data is suitably marked as at a certain state of development. Economic and social capital out of this, more engagement between citizen and the governing classes, and more debate. Data for evidence-based policy. Thank you.